Welcome to Italics, television for the Italian-American experience. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. This month, we visited the Italian Cultural Institute for the presentation of Pound Silence, the new book by Italian journalist and writer Alain Elkann. Later, we attended the programs organized by ILICA, the Italian Language Intercultural Alliance, at the Calandra Institute and at the Queen's Museum. Alain Elkann is a longtime contributor to La Stampa, Nuovi Argomenti, Shalom, and Panta. In Pound Silence, the protagonist Morli, a writer who explores the life of Ezra Pound, the brilliant and controversial American poet, a visionary artist and scholar, but also a figure marked by political extremes and imprisonment for treason. We spoke with the author before the book presentation. Alain, welcome to Italics.
Thank you, thank you.
So you're here because we want to celebrate this new publication in English called Pound Silence. You're actually born in America,
yes,
but you've basically grown up in Europe, in Italy for the most part.
But I always came to America.
You have always come.
As much as I could.
Yeah. So you grew up in Italy, you grew up in France, right?
Yes.
Because your mother was Italian and your father was French.
Yes.
You started out writing young, right? You first thought you were going to go into the business world, but then you decided you wanted to be a writer.
I never really wanted to be a business person, but I had briefly to work in a bank, but I was writing short stories in my office. I always wanted to write, and I started very young writing my diaries, which I always write. And then, I don't know, I started with short stories. At the time, it was difficult to publish short stories. And I went to see a man who was publishing Adelphi called Roberto Calazzo.
Okay.
And we had lunch, and I told him about my short story. He said, you know, you're no one, you're young. Nobody will publish your short stories. Write a novel. So I came back to America, and I wrote Il Tuffo, my first novel.
And the rest is history, as we say in English, right?
That's right.
Who are some of your influences as far as writers?
Depends on in which level. I mean, there were writers who gave me, you know, a lot. One is Tolstoy, you know. I thought that I reread again and again War and Peace and other things. I loved some of Dostoevsky's book. In other words, I like the Russian literature of the 19th century. There is one particular book by Thomas Mann that has inspired me a lot, a small book called Tonio Kröger, where he explains how he became himself an artist and a writer.
Right.
And then Italian writers.
Yeah.
I think the first novel I really liked to read was La coscienza di Zeno by Italo Svevo, who is a real novel of the 20th century. And then I read, of course, I read The Time of Indifference by Moravia, Agostino, and then I read...
Those are my two favorite novels by Moravia.
Moravia, Then I read L'Isola d'Arturo by Elsa Morante, which I liked very much. I read Bazzani, especially Gli Occhiali d'Oro and The Giardino dei Finzi-Contini.
I remember, we didn't know each other back then, but I remember spending my summers in Italy and seeing you on television. You would do these short conversations with people. In fact, it was called Il Libro.
2 minutes on the book, 2 minuti un libro. Every day I was interviewing a person like you do with me for a book, just for 2 minutes. Yeah. And the editor of our telejournal, our news, said to me, go to see a journalist called Indro Montanelli, who was very well known in Italy at the time, and said, ask him if he wants to do for our TV 15, 20 minutes Saturday night about the week. So I went to ask. Yeah. And Montanelli looks at me and he says, okay, I'll do it, but with you. So we did it, and we did it for 9 years without a single contract, you know. and every Saturday we were doing this talk. And also in the middle of that, we did La Storia d'Italia, the history of Italy.
Yeah.
And we did that too together. So I had the luck to have a great maestro for literature and afterwards a great maestro for journalism.
So let's get to your book, Pound Silence. It's a wonderful read for the general reader, but it's also a wonderful read for the person like me who studies this stuff, right? Who studies literature. It's the story of a writer. So right there, as a reader, you go, the writer's writing about writing, who wants to write a book about Ezra Pound. And we hear him thinking about his conversations with Ezra Pound. And it's just exciting. It's wonderful because we're seeing at different levels the writing process in some ways, or the thinking process about a writer. How much might that reflect a little bit of your thinking? When you sit down to write a novel, you go, I'm going to write a novel. Here's where I'm going to go, point A, point B. Or do you zigzag as you write the novel?
So I heard Bezos speaking about his future. And he was talking about, they asked him, are you retiring? He said, no, because I'm thinking that in a few years we'll go to the moon. And then, you know, and you start projects and you don't exactly know where they are going to go, right? But it's worth trying. And then at the end of his speech, I said to him, I said, this is the same for a fiction writer, right? Which answers your question. You know more or less how it starts. But then you never know how it ends. It's also interesting to surprise yourself, you know, because it's like that's why I like the novel, because it's longer. It's like a composition, but it's so interesting the way you built it, you know, and that suddenly you don't know that there's a new character coming in, or in French you say coup de théâtre, you know, suddenly people think that it's going to go like this, and instead it goes like that, you know, I mean, and you follow it. And I like to write longhand.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Still?
I write longhand on notebooks, on school books, you know.
Yeah?
Because I like to follow the pen. You know, because sometimes the pen goes by itself. I don't have to type. It just goes. And sometimes it's not too bad. It takes me time to start writing. The Italian writer Camilleri, Sicilian writer, he invented a word called tambasiare. Tambasiare means, you know, I talk to you, then I read the paper, I have a coffee, I phone to a friend, and then I eat a sandwich, and then I read another thing, until
it comes.
You start, right? Once I have finished to write longhand, I dictate my book to a person that I don't know called Romina. At 6 o'clock when she ends work, she's free for me, and I dictate.
And she types.
She types, she sends it back to me, then I cut, change, add, move, and then I dictate again. Because I like to listen to the music of the writing, you know? And when I dictate, sometimes I change. Today is a great day, Anthony. Today I finished to dictate my new novel called Eva.
Eva.
Eva is the name of a woman, and it's a longer novel. You know, this is the big challenge, that it doesn't matter if the novel is good or bad, that's not up to me to say, but it is, I did it again, you know, from the beginning to the end. And all this is such a joy because you made it.
And so this process that you're telling us, which is yours,
yes, of course.
We've witnessed a writer's process in Pounds. We're not going to ruin the novel for anybody, but it's the process we read. We read the process of a novelist here. And then, of course, there's this. Pound is this great literary figure and a very problematic cultural figure.
I was in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I am obsessed by the idea that I'm not a genius. Okay, I'm sorry. I know that sometimes, oh, who cares? You're not a genius. And sometimes I'm so very unhappy. I said, okay, but I'd love to be a genius, because to be a genius is like an insurance. You know, I mean, there is a famous story of Paul Valéry, a French poet, who asked to Einstein. He said, Einstein, you also carry a notebook in your pocket that when you have an idea, you put it down. And Einstein said, you know, I don't, because I only had one idea, so I don't need, you know, somehow I envy the idea of a genius. Nevertheless, so I was thinking, and suddenly I think of Pound, and I think, was he a genius or wasn't he a genius, you know? And who is this Ezra Pound, who as a young student finishing school, went to Venice via Gibraltar, published his first poems in Venice at his expenses, then went to London, became this incredible editor. He was the secretary of Yeats, the poet, and in the same time he worked for many literary magazines at the time. He published the first poems and then short stories of Joyce. He became the editor of T.S. Eliot, who dedicated to him his West Land. He was a friend of many, many people, and then he goes to Paris. And he's boxing with Hemingway, he's a friend of Brancusi, he's a friend of musicians, of great composers. I mean, he is a great figure in the world of culture. And suddenly he goes to Rapallo. Rapallo is a small, beautiful seaside resort town where he spent 25 years. Why he left Paris or New York or, you know, a big city. And he becomes crazy about Mussolini. He loves Mussolini. And it's very funny that he goes to see Mussolini through an American friend that he meets in Rimini, an American sculptor. And Mussolini, receives this poet who goes to him and teaches him what he should do in economy, in finance. And he said, you should be Jeffersonian because this and that. Mussolini get bored, you know, he's waiting for a poet, and said, okay, fine, thank you. But he was very fascist and until the very, very end of the war. So, of course, he was punished for what he said in the radio about Hitler. He was a traitor for this country. So they closed him in a cage in Pisa, the American. They had a base there just after the war. And in that cage, he was a racist. He was, you know, because of a black soldier, he could have a box and a typewriter in this horrible cage. And he wrote the Pisan cantos, who maybe are his masterpiece. Then he was in Washington. They didn't condemn him to death, but he went to a criminal hospital, mental hospital for 13 years. And because of his friends, Joyce and Hemingway, he could get out under his wife's control. And then he ends his life in Venice, silent. So
and that's where Morli's
the writer.
Morli is the writer.
And so he said, why was he silenced? Let's make him, let's try to speak with him. So Morli invents the character of Alfio, who's a younger, and slowly Pound talks to Alfio. And then it's not enough because you need a girl. So there is Vera who comes into the book and so on and so forth. And these are the Venetian years of Pound.
It's a wonderful read. I like all your work that I've read. This is my favorite right now.
Thank you.
So I have to see what Ava's about, but this right now is my favorite.
But thank you very much. But the question is, can you be a great artist, a great editor as he was, and in the same time have
racist,
bad political ideas, to be an anti-Semite, a racist, a fascist. So how do you judge that? So I inquire with friends and people who studied, met, and opinions are different.
could you really separate the man, his ideology, his anti-Semitism from his works? Do you think it's possible to separate and have a positive judgment about the work and not take in consideration that he was a racist, fascist supporter? That's the question.
I think that Hemingway defines it rather well when he says Ezra was crazy. He was quite a crazy man in a way. He was a character. He was always dressed in a special way. He had a beard. He was, a character. He liked to be a character. So I am impartial in the book. If Pound is a genius, then, fascist, not fascist, anti-Semite, it's irrelevant. If his poem, what he did as an editor is the work of a genius who has changed things, who has made, then the man is not so relevant. When you are a poet, maybe poetry is above politics. And this is something that I have repeated many times in my life, and I think it's true. Literature is literature, politics is politics.
ILICA's events began with a conference at the Calandra Italian-American Institute titled Italian Heritage, Our Culture Between Politics and Economics, and concluded with a gala performance and dinner at the Queen's Museum.
Today, a gentleman is presenting an historical moment. Don't undermine it. I don't remember a born American of Italian origin working his way to speak Italian better than I do and writing a book in Italian which will be introduced at the Dante Alighieri Association in Rome the 24th of November.
The filo rosso of the book, the main theme going through is really one of identity, Italian-American identity, who we are, and one of the things is how they see us. And the day has two meanings, or two references. The day refers to those in Italy, how the Italians see us, Americans of Italian descent, and also the Americans in general, the collective, the sort of general collective of the United States, and how they see the Italian-American population and how they consider us. The other sort of underlying theme is also how we see ourselves, how we Italian-Americans see ourselves, and the question then becomes how we should articulate who we are. What type of imagery, what type of articulation, verbal articulation, etc., should we adopt to express our Italian-American culture with both a large and a small C?
This is a man who made a career first walking and then dancing on the hyphen. He did this little essay and to hyphenate or not to hyphenate, and it was published by Guernica Editions as a little book. He was even surprised, but they wanted it out there. And it became this kind of calling card. He's the hyphen man, because he started talking about the relationship between Italy and Italian America. First of all, Italian American literature was not even discussed in Italian classes or American classes. When I went to my professors at the University of Chicago and I asked them, what about Italian Americans? You're white, you're assimilated, get over it. The reason I ended up coming to meet Anthony and doing this work was that 50 years ago, I went to Italy to find out why my grandparents left and what did they leave. And when I got there, I realized that not only did I not speak Italian, but I wasn't Italian. And that's all I was when I was in the United States. I grew up in the Italian neighborhood, so I grew up thinking I was Italian. If somebody would ask you, what are you? I say, I'm Italian. If this book was in English, it would be the Anthony Tamburi Reader, which we still need. So you could translate this book. But this, if you want to have Anthony in your pocket,
wait, that doesn't
in a metaphorical way, because in my neighborhood, have somebody in their pocket meant they were on the take. If you want to carry him around with you and you read Italian, you'll get to know him.
When I discovered Italian and Italian Americans as subjects in my field, suddenly I found where my passion was in terms of research. And that has really become a center of my intellectual universe. So we belong to multiple social groups. And in addition to ethnicity, Italian American identity also includes race, religion, political affiliation, economic class, profession, and perhaps your bowling league, right? It has been presumed by insiders and outsiders that Italian Americans share a common racial, political, and religious identity. And this is far from the case. At some juncture, though, these overlapping identities coalesce, right? The convergence limits the categorization and enlarges the social group, right? The more pieces we share, the bigger the group gets. But because of this belonging and this social identity theory, by knowing you're in the group, we immediately think we share many things in common, whether we do or not. The point is that Italianness, its culture and traditions, are only part of what makes you who you are. The complexity lies in the interstitial spaces. The decisions we make about who we are do not solely come from one affiliation, which is why a book like Anthony's is so important, because each of these dimensions is pulled apart so you can begin to understand which pieces are important to you, which pieces are important to the community. And just, one last thought is that, and your social identity, your sense of self is changing all the time. It never stops. So the influence of understanding a broader perspective is exceedingly valuable, and why we all need to continue and write and make this known to people. Thank you.
As our President Emerita, Professoressa Donna Chirico, beautifully reminded us, dal passato per il futuro, from the past to the future. As ILICA enters the next phase of its evolution, we do so with purpose and conviction. Our focus today is on synergy, on building bridges with partner organizations, academic institutions, artists and innovators who shared our vision. By uniting our voices and efforts, we amplify the message of Italian culture, not as a something to preserve behind the glass, but as a living force that evolves, inspires, and connects.
In 1992, with a dream to create a virtual bridge for scientists between the United States and Italy, and in 35 years, we funded 420 scholarships for scientists, mostly Italian. Our organization was able to generate 2 of the most important used drugs in the field of cancer research in breast cancer, and many other discoveries that were done by us.
It's my pleasure to invite to the stage a cultural leader and a longtime friend of our association, Anthony Giulian Tamburri, and our Presidente Emerita, Donna Chirico.
Italian Language Intercultural Alliance, and I think that is the place where the academics come in, right? Because this is an extremely important part that is often lost unto the next generation. Yes, we pass along many family traditions, holidays, get-togethers, but we also have to ensure that young people learn about Italian history, culture, language.
We really have to do this together if we're going to succeed in promoting Italian language and Italian culture. We need to do it together. ILICA is the only national organization of Italian origin that has both language and culture in its title. And that in itself speaks volumes.
Tonight we pay tribute to Giuseppe Samà, whose journey is nothing short of inspiring. Giuseppe, on behalf of the ILICA board, I'm delighted to present you with the ILICA Excellence Award.
I just want to say thank you to ILICA, to Giampiero Vincenzo for this award. It's a really honor for me. It's a pleasure. It's, my honor to support ILICA in the future as well in any way I can do. I'm speechless. Thank you so much.
Directly from the Philadelphia Ballet, Federico and Yuka, thank you for sharing your talent today with us.
I want to thank you so much for this invitation. I want to thank you so much, Vincenzo, for inviting me and for receiving this special award. It means a lot for me. I came here in the US 12 years ago, and I've been dancing in the professional ballet company of Philadelphia for already 8 years. I am and I've been the only Italian ballet dancer of the company. So I'm very happy to have the Italian flag, and I'm very happy to bring this art for the rest of the world.
Thanks for watching this episode of Italics. I'm Anthony Tamburri. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata.